When trying to reason with faithful believers, especially religious extremists like creationists, we keep hearing the same old arguments over and over and over again, even though we know they've already been shown to be false, fraudulent, and/or fallacious, probably by everyone who's ever seen them. If you keep it up, you'll suspect that those who keep repeating these must surely know by now that all of these points have already been refuted 1,000 times. I'm R.N. Ra, and this is the Pratt List. The first item on the Pratt list is a biggie. It's the God of the Gaps Fallacy, which imagines that science can't explain it, therefore God. And that means exactly the same thing as, I don't understand it, so I guess it must be magic. And by magic, I mean all supernatural things traditionally and typically described as magical. Curses, potions, enchantments, incantations, necromancy, golem spells, transformation, exorcism, purification rituals, weather control, ghosts, demons, angels, fire-breathing dragons, faith healing, forecasting, water bending, and all other supernatural manifestations or conjurations such as the Bible repeatedly describes. The reason you can't tell the difference between divine miracles and genie magic is because there is no difference. They're the same thing. If magic was real, then characters like Spock or Gandalf or Obi-Wan would be able to demonstrate that in some reliable way. Parapsychologists would have actual ectoplasm that you can study in the lab, and faith healers would work in hospitals healing amputees. But the reason none of that has happened is because none of it is real. That's why we have dozens of children dying every year because their parents prayed for them instead of seeking medical attention. Prayer is no different than, in fact, it's the same thing as wishing upon a star, which is why it doesn't work. That's why prophetic seers never predict anything accurately, and religious apologists are always scientifically and historically, ethically, and morally absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. You get more reliable results from a magic 8-ball, and that's just a toy based on random chance. If it's unexplained by science, that doesn't mean it's explained by magic. If science can't explain it, religion can't explain it either. Gods and magic don't explain anything anyway. Believers say you can't explain everything without God, but they can't explain anything with God. All defenders of the faith can do is pretend to know things they don't know and assert empty, baseless speculation as though it were fact. In other words, they can make up lies and talk out of their ass, but that's about it. And once upon a time, when everything was unexplained by science, our ancestors believed that thunder, lightning, and volcanoes were gods in action, that comets were an omen, that the stars and planets had human characteristics, that sickness was a curse of witchcraft, and that epilepsy was demonic possession. But all those assertions of superstitious nonsense were already wrong even before science could give us the real answers. In each case, the reality was a revelation of whole new fields of study, previously unimagined and vastly more complex than anyone's imagined deity. No doubt that pattern will continue, such that if we ever learn the cause of the Big Bang, or complete explanations for the origin of life, the universe, and everything, they'll each be a wealth of new information with practical application and so advanced as to render our previous belief in gods, ghosts, and magic just as laughably silly as every other field of study so far has already shown. The God of the gaps refers to the gaps in our understanding. The more science can explain, the fewer pockets of ignorance there are for God to hide in. That's why God once lived on a mountain until we climbed it, then he moved to the clouds until we could fly, and now he has to hide in another dimension that doesn't exist either, so that we'll never be able to prove he was never there, even though he was never anywhere other than right here. The God of the gaps is a logical fallacy composed of a combination of other logical fallacies, beginning with question begging. This is the circular argument routing back to the assumed conclusion. Asking who created the universe, for example, presupposes that someone created it when that's not even possible. Before you can say that anything is possible, there has to be some precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. Until you can show there's such a possibility, there isn't one, and God is thus not possible. It's not just that these other things can't exist without God, it's that God himself cannot exist. So everything that does and is requires another explanation, one that actually is an explanation, providing a mechanism that isn't magic, that is supported by evidence, which God isn't, and which accounts for all the facts, which God doesn't. Tide goes in, tide goes out. God can't explain that. The other logical fallacies that make up the God of the gaps are the arguments from ignorance and incredulity. Incredulity says, I can't believe it, therefore it isn't true. But reality stubbornly persists regardless whether you want to accept it or not. Real things don't care if you believe in them. In all the universe, the only thing that requires or desires your faith is a con man trying to exploit your confidence. Deceivers seek believers. You might think that the argument from ignorance might be something like, I never heard of such a thing, so that can't be true. But no, that's actually another combination of fallacies, beginning with false dichotomy. That if it's not this, then it's got to be that, because I'm not even going to consider that there might be other options. Of course, there usually are other options, and the right answer is often one of them. Religion encourages all sorts of unverifiable and immaterial subjective opinions based on ignorant emotions, but it never produces anything we can objectively show to be true. There's never been one time in the history of history where religion ever turned out to be right about anything. And knowledge differs from mere belief in that knowledge is testable with measurable accuracy, allowing ways to show which position is right or wrong or more accurate. So the only things we actually know are the things we can show with science. That's why I say that science doesn't know everything, religion doesn't know anything.